All right, so this week we have sort of a hodgepodge of a few different topics. First one is going to be body image and social media. We are going to talk about some other current topics as well that just going to go into briefly, and then some other potentially popular topics and myths in the fields of kinesiology. Okay. So the first part, our body image and social media. So the cost of getting lean, is it really worth the trade-off? Obviously, well, not all of us, but a lot of us have social media now, and we see certain posts, videos, photos, etc., that might be a little bit sometimes unhealthy. But we'll just go through some of the sort of healthy um, body fat percentages and body types. Okay, so I'll move this down. Should just hide this. Let's see. All right. So first, we'll start off in the top left. This basically goes down through the different, like I said, body fat percentages. Okay, so we'll start off unhealthy. So males about greater than 20%, females over 30%. Okay, and here we can see it just goes through some common athletes of this body type, benefits and trade-offs of this body fat percentage. Okay, remember, we're not really focused on body mass index, because while it can be good for the general population, maybe for more athletic types or more people like fitness type athlete types, percent body fat will probably be the best gauge of sort of health. Okay, so there we can see unhealthy, what we can do more of, what we can do less of, and it's an easy transition down to the healthier range of 15 to 20% for males, 25 to 30% in females. Okay, there we can see athletes of this body type. It's sort of interesting what they chose, what athletes they chose, but in general, they're going to say college age athletes are going to be in this typical range. And then again, what we can do more of, what we can do less of. Again, moving down a little bit more, so still in that healthy range. Okay, there we can see again athletes of this body type. It's interesting, I don't know, to be honest with you, any Olympic canoe and kayak athletes, but that's what they decided to use. But we're just dropping our body fat percentage a little bit, still in that healthy range, and it's an easy transition to get. It's very easy to get from here to here. It's still an easy transition to get from here to here, and then we get into the medium transition. So we're doing a lot more to get down to, gosh, I gotta move all these around, to get down to these body fat percentages. So 10 to 12% and 20 to 22 in females. Okay, it's a little bit harder. We have to do a lot more, and we can see here, and then what we're doing less of. Okay, and then again, moving forward, a hard transition to get to the next slide. Okay, but still in that healthy range. So 6 to 9% for males, 16 to 19% for female. We're still in that healthy range, but now we have some boxers, wrestlers, sprinters, gymnasts. Okay, and still in that healthy range, but then if we drop even more, we get in that unhealthy range. So less than 6% for males, less than 16% for females. Okay, and this is a very hard transition. So this, not always the case, but this is going to be what a lot of us are going to see on social media, especially not so much with the athletes, but more so with like fitness models and bodybuilders and that type of thing. We're going to see this range of body fat. So they're going to be in that unhealthy range. Might see a lot of airbrushing, and essentially they're not keeping this, they're not holding this body fat, they're not looking like this year round or even for multiple days. It's usually days at a time, or maybe even hours or minutes at a time, just during their photo shoot. And I'm a big UFC fan as well, and they have weigh-ins, they have to make weigh-ins, and crazy the difference that they look, what they look like on the scale, just for, I mean, they have to be at that weight for literally minutes, and then they replenish. They have a great system as far as cutting weight because they work with the Performance Institute. But essentially, long story short, what I'm saying is they look like that and they weigh that amount for literally minutes, and then they're back up. I mean, some athletes will gain back 15, 20, 30 pounds by the time they're ready to fight in the next day. Of course, most of it's because of fluid replenishment, but they're not going to look like they do on the scale or even in the ring as compared to what they do the majority of the year. Let's see if I can actually share this. I just saw this the other day, so I'm going to bring it up. Let's see. All right. Here we go. All right. So this is a fighter that just basically hit the UFC, just made his debut, Paddy the Baddy. But essentially, I mean, this is probably not the healthiest thing, but I just put in Paddy the Baddy fat because I wanted to see, because it just popped up. But essentially, this is 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, this is what he looked like. And now we can't see his abs here. We can see in this picture, but just based on his face, this is what he looks like on fight night. So for a period of a couple hours, a couple days, and then this is pretty much what he looks like now as far as in the off season. So he might look like this for months until he's ready to enter his fight camp. And then, but we always think of him like this with his 8-pack abs and everything. And that's probably not what he looks like year round. That's what he looks like for a period, like I said, of a couple weeks, a couple days, and then really, really lean for a couple minutes when he gets on the scale. Okay. All right. So going back. All right. Perfect. All right. So some issues with, again, we're going to focus a lot on like fitness models, but the amount of leanness seen on cover models isn't necessarily healthy. You can see a lot of issues. What would happen if we keep that amount of leanness, okay, in that unhealthy range? And then really we just have to figure out our priorities and goals. Why are we trying to be that lean? And again, maybe it's fine for a very short period of time. I mean, I probably wouldn't agree with that, but you know, if you're making a lot of money off that photo shoot, maybe it's worth it for you. Okay. And that leads us into our next topic, which is eating disorders and disordered eating. So essentially we'll start with disordered eating. So that might include some restrictive eating, fasting, skipping meals. Basically, we're right on that brink of healthy eating, but we're moving into more eating disorder-ish type stuff. And there we can see it starts with healthy dieting. So it might just be an individual that says, all right, well, maybe I want to gain some lean muscle mass. I want to shred or lose some body fat a little bit. And we start doing some things that we're not fully into an eating disorder, but they're not what we would consider normal eating. Okay. And then eating disorders on the flip side, these are actual diagnosed mental health disorders. So serious issues that need to be outsourced to a medical professional, a therapist, psychologist, etc. Okay. Eating disorders can affect both men and women. This is a big issue. Just like any other mental health disorder, it's not sex dependent. Maybe we hear a little bit about more eating disorders in females, and that doesn't mean they're more prevalent in females. I mean, I'm not sure. I'd have to check the recent research, but I know they're very prevalent in men as well. Maybe just not talked about as much. Okay, they can appear at any point in life. Just because we maybe get through high school, get through college or puberty or whatever, it doesn't mean we're safe. Okay, they can occur at any point. They do increase a person's risk of death. Okay, and they're multifactorial diseases, which means they probably are coincided with some kind of other mental health, whether that's maybe depression, bipolar, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, etc. So this is something, we don't talk about it as much in this class, but I would talk to in my strength conditioning concepts class, is that if you have an athlete with an eating disorder, you need to send them to the appropriate source. Like I said, a medical professional, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, whoever you have on staff that is skilled and knowledgeable in dealing with these serious mental health disorders. It's not something you want to treat on your own. And it's just something that disordered eating, you can sort of put up I won't say a red flag, but a yellow flag, and to be aware if you start seeing some of the signs, and we'll touch upon some of the eating disorders as well in the next couple slides. But if you start seeing some of these signs, maybe it's time for you talk to the coach, and potentially pull that athlete aside. So eating disorders, we're gonna dive into anorexia nervosa a little bit and bulimia nervosa as well. I spelled that wrong again. Gosh darn it. Binge eating disorder. We're not going to talk about these a lot, but binge is where we basically have a time where we're gonna just eat a lot of food. So maybe we're feeling really restricted, and then we're gonna have a couple meals or a couple days where we just crush food. Not something that's really a healthy idea. Okay, there you can see some of the other ones. Some of them I have definitions with them. Okay, like pica, craving foods or items that have no nutritional value, like ice would be a big one. Sometimes people want to suck or chew on ice. It doesn't really have any nutritional value other than hydration. Okay. There you can see some others. Body dysmorphia, where a person thinks about one or maybe multiple flaws in their appearance, and they can't stop thinking about it. Okay, maybe that's I feel like I don't know, my inner thighs are really fat, or my belly is really fat, and that's all they focus on. All right, so anorexia nervosa, again, a serious eating disorder that needs to be outsourced. Okay, this is characterized by an unwillingness to maintain normal or healthy weight, and they have a morbid fear of obesity. So I'm not going to say this is an easy one to spot, because it depends on the population. But if you have somebody that's severely underweight, then that's basically the biggest yellow flag, red flag for anorexia nervosa. Okay. And there you can see some symptoms as well. If you start talking to your athletes or your clients or your friends or whatever, and they start talking about they're underweight, and they start talking about one or two of these, then it's time that you, like I said, you may have to develop an intervention or plan an intervention. And then bulimia nervosa, this is a little bit more difficult, because here, I'll jump down here to the symptoms. The body weight is usually in that normal range, or they may even be overweight. So it's not something where you physically see them and right off the bat they probably have an issue, because they're typically consuming a lot of calories or binge eating. Like I said, binge eating episodes is where we just crush food and calories in one episode. And it's the difference between binge eating disorder and bulimia nervosa mainly is once they hit a certain amount of times per week. So here we can see at least once a week, where we binge eat, and then compensatory behaviors. What we mean by that is purging or throwing up. Okay, so if that occurs at least once a week, it sort of transitions from binge eating disorder to bulimia. Okay, there we can see some other symptoms as well. You may have co-occurring conditions, self-injury, substance abuse, impulsive behaviors. Okay, and again, this one is a little bit more difficult to spot, but It could be something where you're seeing a friend or whoever it is that you might be aware of or might be cautious of having this, where they eat a lot and then maybe they disappear for a period of time and they say, oh, I'm gonna use the restroom. Maybe that's every time after they binge. Well, maybe they're throwing up during that time. um it's a little harder because you don't always spend a lot of time, but this is where the use of friends and other people that are around them might be a really big benefit. There you can see, I'm not going to go through these, but there's a lot of health consequences to eating disorders. Okay, cardiovascularly, the gastrointestinal tract, neurologically, endocrine system is very affected by these issues. Okay. And sort of we'll take a little step into the history lesson with some of these eating disorders, but we're going to talk specifically about body positivity movement. So in the 60s, there was a association that was founded, the National Association to Aid Fat Americans, and it switched their name now to National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, or NAAFA. And it's in the world longest running fat rights organization. So that was when it was founded in the 60s. And then in the 70s, this association called for body positivity, fat acceptance, fat liberation, and released what they called a fat manifesto, which is they wanted equal rights for fat people in all areas of life. And they declared diet culture as their enemy. So it was actually surprising to me that it went back so far. I thought it was more of a recent couple decades thing. But in the 80s and 90s, more fat activists have spread across the globe. And there you can see they're seen on TV, in front of gyms, in front of the White House. And then in the 2000s, that's when I sort of started realizing body positivity and fat visibility, with social media presence and celebrities. And essentially, it's a tough line because yes, you want to be acceptance of you want to accept all people, shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities, nationalities, etc. But at the same time, we don't want to promote unhealthy behavior. Okay, so if someone is just naturally a little bit bigger but they're still healthy, that's great. We want to accept them. Now, if someone is unhealthy and that causes them to be very overweight, obese, maybe morbidly obese, no physical activity, eat terrible diet, that's something that is not, I mean, yes, we want to still accept them, but we want to try and promote change in them because it's not healthy for them or the culture in general. So takeaways just from the whole body image and eating disorders is evaluate your lifestyle and consider what's important to you and your need to be healthy. So there's certain things that um, I try not to eat. Just speaking from my own self, I try not to eat, but I don't limit myself from a calorie standpoint or a food standpoint. If I want something, I'm going to eat it. I know I'm not going to be as lean as possible, or even putting on some muscle mass. I would love to have a little bit more muscle mass, but the work that's involved to do that, planning, buying food, so using obviously more money, stuff like that. At this point in my life, not willing to do that. So my that's not as important to me as certain other things, enjoying myself, enjoying my friends, etc. Okay. Be conscious of health risks and benefits of exercise or the lack of. What are you willing to do to reach your goals? Okay. What are your goals? Obviously, a balanced life is always beneficial. Both, you know, you got to be healthy, of course, but also from maybe a social standpoint, maybe, it's good to have goals, but if those goals maybe, okay, now I can never go out to eat with my friends, maybe you want to reevaluate, but it's up to each individual person. Just be healthy with it regardless. Eating, exercise, try and be healthy with it, okay, and enjoy life. So that's our takeaway there. We're going to go through some common myths and popular topics. So the common myths part is going to be basically how I want you to do your presentation. It's just going to be like a quick snapshot of how we're going to do our presentations. You guys are just going to do an expanded version. Remember, 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so common myths. These are some common myths. Lifting weights stops growth. Anabolic window. The afterburn or high intensity interval training causes increased caloric burn up to 24 hours post workout. Burning fat. So when we're burning fat during cardio, it's better to use moderate intensity. I think most of us have probably heard of most of these myths, and I know I have too often to count. Okay, so here we go. Lifting weight stops growth. Okay, again, this is how I, not so much the looks of this slide, but I want to use actual research and peer-reviewed articles to see, well, is this true? Lifting weights stops growth. Children and adolescents should participate in moderate to vigorous physical activity, blank per day, and muscle and bone strengthening activities 3 or more times per week. Okay, there we can see from 1998, the once taboo subject of weight training in children has been researched and shows that safe exercise can be prescribed. Okay, the key lies in exercise technique, progression, and safe equipment. Okay, and you can read those, you can read through these quotes. Again, I would urge you guys when you're going through your presentation to give me some figures. This is boring, this is all words, but essentially what this is saying, again, if I had a takeaway slide, it would be lifting weights does not stop growth. It can actually be safe and beneficial for children. I would show some of those benefits. Beneficial for children, but the caveat, it has to be properly monitored, technique over weight, and properly progressed. Okay. So anabolic window. Anabolic window, if I were with you guys, I would, ask you guys to explain it, but essentially anabolic window, I don't actually know where this came from. Maybe some of those muscle magazines. But anabolic window is, what they're saying is you have to get amount of protein in within like half hour to an hour after you stop lifting. It's usually related to resistance training. Okay, you have to get a certain amount of protein in that window. If you miss that window, you're basically not gonna increase your muscle mass. Okay, but let me get all of those. Okay, most important is actually overall daily caloric intake and protein intake. Specifically, when it comes to protein, we're talking about leucine. That's a certain amino acid, essential amino acid that we need. But it's more focused on overall daily intakes. Okay, and there we can see muscle protein synthesis. So the building of muscle protein can actually remain elevated for 1 to 2 days after your workout. So the anabolic window is greater than this 15 to 45 minutes or half hour to an hour. It basically essentially is overall 1 to 2 days after that training session. Are we getting in enough calories? Are we getting in enough protein, specifically leucine? Okay, so there we can see the same thing I just said. Whoops. There I would have some of my research where I have some quotes. Again, for your presentation, I don't want to see a lot of these quotes. I want to see more everything in your words. Not everything. You can use some quotes, but most of the stuff in your words. But just for now, I put these quotes on here and you can read through those. Here we can see a beautiful figure. This is actually my original advisor, Dr. Stout. I believe he created this, but this is daily protein distribution of maybe a typical person, where we're going to have maybe breakfast, we only get oatmeal, and that's maybe a little peanut butter in there, or whatever that is. That looks like honey, maybe. But we get a little bit of protein, lunch, maybe a little bit before, and then dinner, we have a fat intake of protein. Our total protein for the day is only 90 grams. Okay, here we can see that's where we're anabolic. This is where we're catabolic. So we're dipping into catabolism quite a bit throughout the day, although we do touch anabolism a little bit as well. But here we can see that maximum rate of protein synthesis or leucine saturation. So basically we're going to build the most muscle, the maximal rate of muscle building, essentially. Okay, so we don't maximize our potential. Here's an optimal protein intake. We're still dipping into catabolism a little bit, but we're getting more of a bolus of protein. So every few hours, we're going to reach that maximal rate of protein synthesis. So, but still, our total protein is pretty far down. Okay, so this would be more maintenance of muscle mass, maybe increasing. Okay, but we're going to stimulate that protein synthesis multiple times. But now here we can see basically we did the same thing. Here's our maximal rate of protein synthesis or a leucine threshold. Here we actually have another line, which is a maximal rate of protein synthesis with resistance training and nutrition. But there we can see we basically increase our total protein and we increase the amount of meals where we saturate that leucine threshold or even increase that or exceed that leucine threshold. Okay, and that's for a 70 kg athlete. Okay, so that's sort of the anabolic window and sort of saying that, again, takeaway, it's more important to focus on the entire day of calorie and protein intake than it is that 15 to an hour after. So afterburn or EPOC, okay, essentially the calories we burn after the workout. So higher intensity. So let me backtrack. EPOC, post-exercise oxygen consumption. Some of you guys may have learned that in your assessment class, but essentially higher intensity exercise gives us a higher excess EPOC. So higher post-exercise oxygen consumption. And how much higher? You can see there, 6 to 15% of the calories you burned during the workout. Okay. So if you burn 500 calories more than the EPOC could, during the EPOC could be 50 to 75 calories. So not so much. Okay. And there we can see, again, I use some quotes. The exercise stimuli required to promote a prolonged EPOC are unlikely to be tolerated by non-athletic individuals. So basically, individuals that don't train, we're probably not going to be able to handle that EPOC. Okay, even those those articles that have incorporated prolonged EPOC have identified that this comprises only 6 to 15% of total oxygen cost of the exercise. Okay, whoops. So what that's saying is the EPOC is we're going to burn more calories during the actual workout. We might burn a little bit after during that EPOC or that afterburn, but it's primarily everything. The majority of the calories burned is going to be during our exercise. Okay. Burning fat. Okay. So what this myth is saying is, okay, and I hear a lot of actually older individuals and adults saying this, but okay, I want to burn fat. I'm going to stay in a low to moderate intensity exercise. Okay. So to burn fat during cardio, it's better to use that moderate intensity. Well, it's true, but there's also some caveats in there. Okay. To lose fat in general, we need to be in a caloric deficit. I think most of us know this. And when working in our higher intensities, we're going to burn more calories overall, which is going to lead to weight loss, lead to fat loss. Okay. So it's not so much about our intensity. Yes, if we do low intensity exercise for a long duration, we might be able to burn as many calories, but high intensity exercise, we're going to burn more calories typically in a shorter amount of time. Okay. Let's see. So here we can see this table. of our different intensities. So their intensity of exercise, low to high, okay? High, 75% of VO2 max, okay? We're gonna burn a lot more calories. Even though a lot more calories come from fat during our low intensity, remember, we're looking at total caloric intake, and are we in a caloric deficit? So there you can see high intensity exercise burns double the amount of calories. Even though it's a less percentage of fat, if we follow this over, we're going to burn more calories from fat and more total fat during our high intensity exercise. Okay. So for weight loss, it's actually overall nutrition is more significant than cardio for weight loss. Okay. So, what I advise people is just find a piece of cardio you like to do and hit some high intensity intervals. You're going to spend less time on the machine or doing whatever activity, and you're going to burn more total calories overall, which is going to lead to more fat loss. Okay. All right, and then finally, a couple other popular topics, just two: caffeine and energy drinks, and alcohol and exercise. Oops. So caffeine and energy drinks, okay, this is a typical the recommendations in the literature for amount of caffeine for increased performance. So 3 to 6 milligrams per kg, or about 300 milligrams, depending on your body weight. Okay, just notice that's per kg, not per pound. So you have to do the math a little bit. But tolerance and dependence, you can become dependent on caffeine as low as 100 milligrams for 1 week. Okay, so that's like a cup of coffee, a small cup of coffee for 1 week, and you might have some caffeine dependency. Okay, so there you can see a little meme there. Toxicity, okay, we can consume too much caffeine, which is typically over about 400 milligrams per day in adults, which can, there you can see it can mimic amphetamine poisoning and lead to some serious issues. Rarely death, but it can occur. And side effects are more common when people ingest caffeine unknowingly. Okay. Withdrawal, we can also have caffeine withdrawal, which can have effects as early as 12 to 20 hours. I think a lot of us probably know an individual that takes maybe a little bit too much caffeine, and then they try and get off, and they have, I mean, headaches is probably the most common that I hear. I have friends that drink a lot of coffee and then they cut down and they got serious headaches, and that's what that meme comes from in the last one. Okay, so caffeine and energy drinks, behind multivitamins, energy drinks are actually the second most consumed supplement based on this research from 2010. I'd like to see some updated research, but I didn't pull it up for this slide or this presentation. But there you can see energy drink consumption is second behind multivitamins, which, I mean, I thought protein powder would be a bit higher, but that's what these researchers found. Wide range of caffeine content based on the actual energy drink. So that's something that you probably want to look at, the caffeine intake prior to consumption. And then a lot of energy drinks are going to contain other vitamins, minerals, and essentially different nutrients and sources as well. Okay. And there we can see where some of our common energy drinks fall compared to, oops, I wish those arrows stayed on there. I'm sorry about that. But compared to some of our other drinks, okay, there you can see coffee ranges depending on what we're drinking. But these energy drinks, again, just because you're getting a Monster, or maybe actually energy drink consumption and energy drinks have taken off. So Monster has so many different types. So don't take this with a grain of salt and think all Monsters have 86 milligrams. Again, look at the label for the actual caffeine intake. I think all of them will list their caffeine intake. I'm not positive on that, but I think most of them. So this is a little outdated, but generally this is the ranges that they're at. And then finally, alcohol and exercise. This is pretty basic. I think all of us know that probably alcohol negatively affects our exercise and performance. It's directly linked to rate of injury. So that's something you gotta, if you're working with athletes, you know, you might have to talk to them about that. Adjust training. I mean, it's tough because do you want to adjust training because you know it's Halloween and they're gonna all go out? I mean, you need to get it work in, but at the same time, you don't want to put them at increased risk of injury. And then from a general fitness standpoint, alcohol will lower our muscle protein synthesis, so we're not gonna put on as much lean muscle mass. And then it does have effects on actual muscle as well, where we're going to decrease the cross-sectional area in our fiber types. So we're not only going to not put on as much muscle, but we're going to decrease the size of the muscle we already have based on this study from 2005. Okay. So there, just a brief overview of some of our topics, some different popular topics. Let's see, let's stop that share. Whoops. Some popular topics, some myths. Again, that's a pretty rough showing of what I want you guys to do for your presentation. Again, be a lot more creative, be a lot more entertaining than I am, but that just shows you some of the ways we can look at the research and pair that up and then give us some takeaways. All right, alcohol and exercise, takeaways, boom, just like that last slide, okay? Let me know if you guys got any questions with this one.